Good morning. I got a message this morning. I noticed that Adobe has released Lightroom Classic 9.2. And so I anxiously jumped online to see what features were. Sometimes these don't have enough features to really make a video update about, but this one has a feature that I've been waiting for since I think version 5 or 6. And I thought, I need to do a video on this one right away because it's actually, for me, really good news. And so let's just get into it. Now, right now, I've got my Adobe Cloud up, and as you can see, there's an update to Photoshop, and I don't know what that is about yet. But if I go down, it says Update Lightroom Classic. And so I'm going to go ahead and hit Update. And in a few minutes, we'll get it up there, and we'll talk about what's new in it, especially what I think is a pretty significant new feature that I'm pretty excited about. Okay, let's go ahead and get Lightroom open. Now, the first time you open Lightroom, once you install the update, you'll get a list of what the new features are. I've already updated it because I've been playing with it just to make sure I understand what they've done new. So let's get into the very first feature. You'll notice that this file is a PSB file. Lightroom has not supported PSB files, but as of 9.2, you can now import and work with PSB files in Lightroom directly. I did a video and wrote an article back when Lightroom was version 5 about a workaround for that. And so this is really a much needed feature, especially with camera files getting bigger and people doing more stitching. Right now, a TIFF file can only be 4 gigabytes in size, and it's pretty easy to end up with a file that's bigger than that if you do any layering in Photoshop, or if you're merging. In this case, this is 3 or 4 images merged into a panel. A couple things about that. In my case, I'm going to go to this folder here. There is a couple things I've discovered. So we'll go to this image here and go to grid, and you'll notice here I says this purple is this is my master file. This is what I print from, I sell from, and you'll notice it says from PSB. So these others are all work files. Some of these are the originals. One of these is a triptych I've been working on, but what I want to do is get this PSB file into Lightroom now. And in my case, I can just search my file my library for any file name that it says from PSB, and I can find it. So what we want to do then is to synchronize this folder, because this PSB is sitting next to that. But notice when I synchronize this, I actually have 2. That's because I found a little problem earlier. So I actually have 2 PSB versions. And you notice one of them does not have a thumbnail. If I turn the one with the thumbnail off and import, you'll see the reason and the error I'm getting. It says I can't open this because I have to save it with a maximize compatibility. Now, I've never paid much attention to that little dialog, and so I don't know what some of them obviously have been saved with maximize compatibility. This one doesn't. I thought I would just cover this really quick in case you get this problem, how you resolve it very quickly. So what you have to do is go to your folder, or go to your original PSB file, which is located on your hard drive. Now, there's a couple ways I could do this. I can right click and show in Finder and find it. In my case, I can also, the way I do this is I can open this in Photoshop, and you'll notice this is a linked file. So this Photoshop document from PSB actually links to the original PSB, and all I've got to do is double click it and I open that, and there's my original PSB. What I need to make sure before I save it is to go over to Preferences, go to File Handling, make sure that Maximize PSD and PSB file compatibility is either Always or Ask, so that when you save this file, you can at least say yes, or if it's Always, it always will. Now, the other file that you saw in that import dialog was a new version of this that was saved, and I had Always checked, so it will import. Make sure it's not set to Never, because you definitely have to have that turned on when you save it. Once you do that, then all you do is do a Save As, and just leave the name the same and hit Save, and save right over the top of the old one. Okay, once you do that, and I've already done that, when you go back to Lightroom, let's close these up. When we go back to Lightroom, I'm going to get that full screen. And I synchronize the folder now. And I have those 2. Like I said, I did it because I'm learning. I wouldn't have needed to do this. This time when I come back, I would have had a thumbnail here because I would have resaved over the top of it. Let's turn that one off and go ahead and import this one. Now, one thing I found on a couple of these I'm testing, if I have one-to-one previews turned on, it took a really long time. And I'm not sure why, but what I found is if you go to embedded in Sidecar, this PSB will import pretty quick. And apparently the embedded preview of this PSB is one-to-one. Let me just show you that real quick because this is a really big file. I don't know, it's a 5 or 6 gigabyte file, maybe bigger than that even. If I bring this up and if I click to go one-to-one, you'll notice it doesn't have to build a preview. It's actually pretty quick. Now it's a really big file, so it's not super fast. But apparently the one-to-one preview that was embedded and it imported or the preview that is embedded and it imported is already a one-to-one preview. So I recommend that when you bring your PSB files in, that you leave that embedded in Sidecar turned on. I imported the two in the subway, the ones, the shot that when I opened it up, those two, it took 5 minutes to import 2 PSB files. So I don't know what the deal is there. That might be related to my eGPU. I don't know. Anyway, this is the most significant feature for me of this update because I have dozens of these PSB files. It's going to simplify my Lightroom library dramatically and my workflow. Now, one thing additionally that I haven't quite figured out yet, I hope this isn't a bug and I'll do some more research. But what I also found was this file right now on my display looks like it's supposed to look. If I go to the develop module, it's suddenly oversaturated by a huge amount, and I'm not sure if this is a preview problem. I don't quite know what's going on. I'm afraid to touch it right now. Okay, thought I would pop in real quick. I've been working on this video for a couple hours, and I remembered my buddy last time when he put 9.1 on. He had a problem with the color just like I did. And what we found out was it had to do with his BenQ display and the fact that the new version of Lightroom somehow wasn't reading the monitor profile correctly. And he remade his BenQ profile and with the Palette Master software, and once he did, that fixed his problem. So I just finished doing that with mine. I've already got all the video taped. I'm just doing the final editing now. And so I thought I'd throw this in because that cured my problem as well. So if you're using a BenQ display, you might find that when you update, for some reason, I don't know what the deal is. I might report this to BenQ. Maybe it's a Lightroom problem, I don't know. But it's an easy fix. You just have to throw your colorimeter on there, make your BenQ display with Palette Master software again, and then that should fix everything. So let's just go ahead and finish talking about what 9.2 has in it. Okay, the next feature is about how the interface to change your default settings when you import a file. And I did a whole video about using the camera defaults so that when you import from a camera, things are automatic. You can always do this as a preset as well, but if you do it as a default, then it's automatic and you can't forget, and you can actually modify it based on each camera and actually each camera body. In the past, if you were in the develop module, I did a whole video on this. You could go up into develop and you would be able to set a camera to use a new set of defaults. And this is anything you do over in the develop panel. The reason I did the video is because usually when lens corrections by default when you import, those are not enabled. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and have these automatically applied whenever I import. Now when you do an import, you can actually make a preset that does that, or you could just go up and say, you know, whatever I've got here, make that my default. Well, what Adobe's done now, which is maybe a little bit better, is they've moved that over to a preference. If I go to preferences and I go to presets, you can see now that I have, this is the default here, and now I can first of all enable it for a specific camera model. If I want, I can actually narrow it down to a specific body. I can select the camera model I want it to apply to, so maybe I wanted everything that's an A7R3. And then what I would do is, before I do that, what I would do is make all the changes here. So let's say that every time I import from my A7R3, 95% of the time I'm adding 3 or 4 points of clarity, I'm adding a couple of points of saturation, I'm adding a little vibrance. Let's say that I prefer a different profile, and I'm a landscape photographer, so let's say when I'm importing, I prefer, let's look at some of these profiles. Maybe I decide that I prefer this look, over this look, whatever. We're just going to use this as an example. Or let's say that I build my own camera profile. So once I get all the things that I would normally do and nothing special for the particular file that I'm using, then what I would do is save a preset, which is what you would do before. All right, now I've already saved one. All right, let's go preset plus. I would turn off anything that I don't need. Now, like basic, I didn't do anything in the basic panel, but I could leave it on because I didn't do anything in it, so it won't make any change. You can turn them off or leave them on because if you didn't actually apply them, it doesn't matter. Call it, and we're going to say this is for our A7R4 or A7R3 presets import. Now, before when you did that, when you went to the import dialog box, you could select that preset and apply it. The advantage of doing it this way, if we go over here to the preferences and we save, when we go to A7R3, we want to use that preset that we just made and we create a default. The advantage of that is I don't have to remember to set that in the import dialog box. From now on, every time I put this A7R3 card in my card reader and import the files, Lightroom will automatically use this instead of its own default. And you can do anything you want. Now, the reason I think this is probably nice is because what I can do, let's say that I decide to change it some other way. So let's say that I decide to add something else and I'm finding I'm doing it every time as well. Maybe I've found that every time I do it, I'm adding, maybe you're a portrait photographer and you're adding a 15-point vignette to every single image. And now I want that to be my default. Well, the nice part is now all I've got to do is go over here, right click on this, say update with current settings, and it will make that, it will update the preset, so it'll automatically from then on will be the default when I import the camera. With the other system, you had to clear the default and make a new one or reset a new one. So it's a little bit cleaner interface. I don't know if it's a big deal, but I think it's a little bit cleaner interface, and I'm going to probably do a video on this once I get an update in my old video, once I really understand it better. Using the default, changing your default presets is actually really powerful. Most every camera that I import, I've created my own presets that just fine-tune it a little bit and save me time. There are things that I would do on most of the files, and now I don't have to do them anymore because it happens right when I import them. Next one is really simple. It's simply an interface change. If you've ever been using in the develop module and you've got 4 files, these are all real similar to each other. And so you are selecting a selection. You'll notice as soon as I make a selection of these files, my previous button changes to a sync. Now we can make changes. Right now I'm only making changes to the file that's most selected. That's the one that has the border that's wider. If I make any develop module changes, those apply only to that one. I can make those changes and hit the sync button and move them to all the others. A lot of times when you've got a situation like this, let's just go back to grid view, where you've got a whole series of images that are basically identical. This is a series I took to do a stack with, and you want to make all the same changes to every image. In the develop module, you can select all those images and you can just enable this auto sync right here. So whatever you do to your most selected image automatically happens to the rest. And the only change in this version is this is now lights up, is much brighter, and it's much more obvious. So it's more obvious that you're in auto sync mode and you don't accidentally leave it on and start syncing it to files and not realize it. So a real simple change. I've actually done that a couple times and had to go back and take some, go back to a bunch of files and remove something I did. So that's another little feature that they added. Okay, the next feature has to do with the export dialog box. If you want to export a file, go up here under File, Export. There's a lot of different presets here, and let's say that you want to export this 4,000 pixel JPEG, and you're working on this and you decide, I'm going to make a slight change to it. So you change, let's say we just change the name of this text to new change. And then you realize you need to go back and select, because you're exporting 7 files. If you would hit cancel, and then we go back to export, as you can see, I've lost that change that I made. Now what happens is if I hit done, let's new export, now what they've added is a done option. And when I hit done, then what happens the next time I come back to export, that setting remains in the dialog box. Not a real big deal, but it can be handy a couple of times. And the cool part is if I hit export, it also saves those, that becomes the new default. So basically it allows you to go, you can save that default or those changes, go back to do something else, and then come back and you still have them. That's a pretty simple change, but it'll be handy sometimes. This one seems pretty minor, probably not worth mentioning, but I'll mention it anyway. If you go up under your sync status here, they've added this sync FAQ, and you click on that, that takes you to the web. Talks about syncing with Lightroom Classic. So it's just another way, basically it's just another way to get to that information. That was all, the information isn't new, everything was there before. It just gives you, if you're in Lightroom and you're trying to figure out, okay, how did I do that? How do I need to do that again? Just gives you a quick way to get to that. Very simple. So another change, which is a nice feature change for those that have two displays, they've added the ability for you to actually set and control what is your secondary display. If you go display up here under your preferences, you can say choose monitor for secondary window, and you can pick that monitor. So right now you see this is Lightroom is open on this one. So say whenever I use my secondary monitor, I want to use the other one. And basically it looks like what you do is you have Lightroom open on the one you want to use, and then let's say that you have three displays, you can always pick one of those other two. Nice change. It gives you better control than you've had before. I still don't know if the other display is fully color managed or not. That used to be a problem. All I put on my secondary display, sometimes I have the grid view on the other display, but I actually don't use the secondary display most of the time while I'm using Lightroom. Okay, a couple other things they've added some support for Photoshop Elements 2020. I don't know, that's a big deal, but some people might like it. They've added GPU acceleration for lens correction and transforms, and they've also added eGPU support for enhanced details. Now, I haven't found enhanced details to be that useful. I might try it a little bit more. I have found that an eGPU on a Mac actually slows Lightroom down in several tasks, and depending on the MacBook Pro model you have can really slow it down. So I'm not sure how great that is. The only good thing about it is they continually keep adding better support for GPUs, and eventually once they really do leverage the GPU the way it should, we should see some significant improvements in speed. Right now I'm trying to find some tests and ways to actually measure GPU performance and how well it works, and find out if your GPU is actually doing what it's supposed to do, or in fact, like my eGPU, is actually hurting. Try to develop 5 or 6 simple tests you can run and compare with it on and off and figure that out. Last thing that they added was the support for cameras and lenses. That's always something that comes out with every update. And for those like me, there are not many of us I know, but if you're shooting an IQ4 150 digital back, after a long time, Lightroom now supports the IQ4 150. And I do like the auto mask feature in Lightroom much better than I do in Capture One. Capture One's really powerful. I still use it quite a bit to do my raw processing, and then the TIFF file comes into Lightroom because I print only from Lightroom. But the downside is that auto mask feature in Capture One just isn't quite as good, and the digital asset management phase of Capture One just isn't really as clean or as useful as it is in Lightroom. So I use Lightroom as my primary tool most of the time still, and it'll be nice to do preliminary work on my files. Now, once in a while, I might still have to pop over into Capture One with an IQ4 150 file, but right now I can't even see them in my browser. So they're sitting there, and so it's been really frustrating for the last year, and I'm really glad. I was worried they were going to not support that, but they typically take a while to support it because it's not a real popular camera model. And I know I've met Eric Chan. I know him. We're acquaintances, and we had a couple of nice conversations. And he's an awesome developer, and he's kind of involved in that raw processor part. So Eric, if you're out there and you happen to be watching this video, thanks for getting the IQ4 150 into the new version of Lightroom. It's going to be great for me and a lot of other people too. Anyway, well, thanks for watching the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel down there, and if you enjoy my videos, hit that like button once in a while. So until next time, see ya.